action on oil and gas matters. And we'll be publishing all of the questions that we get tonight, along with responses to those questions. So that's a very summary overview. Also tonight joining us are David Bodenkarten. He's special counsel for the town who helps us with oil and gas issues, and he can help us with legal questions. And if I missed anything, David, that you want to elaborate on, I'd be happy to have you do that at this point.
Only please that we really are seeking questions. We may not be able to give to folks answers tonight, but each question that is asked will be considered and will be responded to. If not again this evening, at a short future date.
Thank you, David. And also Fred Starr, our Director of Planning and Community Development, is also on the call tonight, as well as Gabby Ray, our Communications and Community Engagement Director. So as David mentioned, we won't be answering all your questions tonight. We will be noting those questions, and we will follow up with additional information in response to all the questions and comments that we get. So thank you very much for joining us tonight. And Gabby Ray, I'll turn it back to you.
All right, thank you for being here tonight. I did want to give a couple pieces of instruction before we get started with your comment. Thank you so much for registering. We wanted to make sure to do that so you would have a fair way of going in order without me having to try to catch your virtual hands raising at different times. So thank you for that. I do have a list that I will show in just a minute to show who's going to be going first, next, after that, all the good stuff. So everybody who registered to speak will have 3 minutes to speak, and we will have a timer countdown for you. Please try to follow that 3 minutes. We will give you a warning towards the end of it, but we'll also show on the screen that little timer countdown for you. We just want to make sure everybody has the opportunity to speak tonight, so we did put that time limit on there. If you did, I don't think I see anybody who called in on the phone, but if you were just on a call-in line, we do have an option for you to speak through that. And if I see someone pop in that way, I'll give you those instructions. Otherwise, we are going to call your names, give you the option to speak, which means you should be able to unmute yourself. So when you do that, please say your name and address, and then you can begin your comments. Like I mentioned a little bit earlier, the Q&A function is also active. So if you didn't want to speak out loud, but did still want to share some comments with staff, you can certainly use that Q&A function. We will be collecting all of the questions and comments during this session and putting them together in a document to share with you all afterwards. So feel free to use the Q&A function. If you do have technical difficulties of some sort, please feel free to use that chat to talk to the panelists, and we can help you through those technical difficulties if you have them as well. And I do believe that's about it. It's being recorded tonight, so you can view this on YouTube if you'd like to, and we will post the link to this on the oil and gas webpage, which is also where the questions will be. So that's just erieco.gov/oil and gas, all one word. We'll share that again with you in a few more minutes. Just before we get started with public comment, I did want to ask a couple of questions. If you're using your computer, I'm going to pop up some polling questions on here. It's kind of an unofficial survey of you all. So if you can see it, please feel free to answer the questions. Panelists, you're not allowed to vote, so you probably won't see it. But to all of our attendees, I'm just gonna launch this now. Please take a couple minutes to fill it out, and then we will get started with public comment. So I'm going to give you about 30 seconds while I get everything ready on the back end here, and then we'll get started. All right, your answers are rolling in. I have a little over half of them submitted so far, so I'll give it just a couple more seconds while I get everything ready. Again, you will see the timer countdown on your screen as soon as we get started. So please pay attention to that 3 minutes if you will. And just so you all know, I'll share this on my screen in just a minute, but today we will be starting, like I said, in the order of registration for your comments tonight. That will begin tonight with Jon Lee and then Elisabeth Fisher. So if the two of you are on the call, be ready and we will unmute you shortly. All right, looks like I have everyone who wanted to fill out the poll seems to have filled out the poll, so I'm going to go ahead and end that now. Thank you for your participation in that. Okay. Perfect. So, like I said, first tonight we're going to start with Jon Lee. I'm going to add our public screen here to the screen, and then following that will be Elisabeth Fisher. So let me give you the chance to talk here, Jon, and whenever you're ready, you can unmute and get started.
Good evening to whomever is here. I'm Jon Lee. As most of you know, I've done a number of projects in Erie, and I've got a couple of sections of ground out, one along 52, one along I-25. I support the notice. We've done that as a standard from virtually the beginning of time in Erie. And so we notice everybody in the community. We don't use a dimension. Some of those questions were what dimension? It doesn't really matter. If it's in our community, we notice. If it's in the area around our community, we notice. So we have also gone on these two sections of ground. We've gone out and bought all of the wells out and P&A'd them. And we did this well before the town was looking of maybe that should be a standard. I feel like we're being somewhat punished now because we did that, and now we're back to a dimension away from a P&A well. And so I don't agree with 50 feet, 25 feet on two sides. And because it's basically a lot, it's going to be longer than 50 feet. So a 25 by 25 by 100 is pretty typical. That's what you're seeing with the other ones. So we've gone to the extent of getting rid of the wells and P&A'd them. We also go out and test a phase 2 environmental. So we know if there is a methane issue or any kind of leak issue around those wells, and we take care of it early on. We don't wait till a plat. We've removed all the flow lines and gathering lines that we can. As you probably know, there are many lines that go from off property through other properties. And some of those just can't be removed or are too large to economically be doing that. And we create easements. We make sure we have knowledge. One thing you do need to understand, though, is those lines, if they are not a flow line, a gathering line, distribution line, whatever you want to call it, other than a flow line, they're regulated by the DOT, not the COGCC. And the previous meeting, everybody talked about COGCC, but that's not who regulates those. The DOT does. So notice we're good with. I have trouble with increasing setbacks, although I don't have any wells other than plugged in abandoned wells on my property. And I don't think I should have to create large setbacks from the adjacent property.
All right, thank you so much for your comments tonight. I appreciate that. All right, and next we have Elisabeth Fisher. I'm going to allow you to speak now. If you want to unmute, and you can go ahead when you're ready.
Good evening. Thank you for holding this meeting. I'm glad to join you all tonight. And I'll start with a question. To what extent has the possibility of adjusting or amending current development plans going forward with 350-foot setbacks been looked into? And then I think a 1 mile distance for disclosure to home buyers of oil and gas wells and pipelines is reasonable, fair, and it's the right thing to do. Please also include facilities like the hub, compressor stations, waste injection wells, and the landfill, because some oil and gas waste streams are accepted there. The purpose of reverse setbacks is to protect public health, safety, and welfare. We need strong setbacks. Whatever distances are decided on, waivers should not be part of the basic mix. Why enact standards and then compromise them by allowing loopholes? Should circumstances need to be considered, such exemptions should not be handled administratively, but rather go through a public process, including a public hearing and a board decision. That's for transparency. Those are my opening comments. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your comments. All righty. Next in our list, we're going to have Sandra Duggan and then followed by Kelsey Barnholt. Sandra, let me give you permission to speak. If you want to unmute, you can go whenever you're ready.
Good evening. We know that oil and gas is a bad neighbor. As an Erie resident who's been disproportionately impacted by fracking, I assure you that these operations are torturously loud, unsightly, and inherently toxic. We have evidence that these activities are dangerous to public health, the environment, and the climate cycle. According to the Compendium of Scientific, Medical, and Media Findings demonstrating risks and harms of unconventional gas and oil extractions, as fracking operations in the United States and abroad have increased in frequency, size, and intensity, a significant body of evidence has emerged to demonstrate that these activities are dangerous in ways that cannot be mitigated through regulation. Threats include detrimental impacts on water, air, climate stability, public health, farming, property values, and economic vitality. For these reasons, you ought to protect your constituents by keeping them as far from these operations as possible. We desperately need strong regulations for reverse setbacks to be protective of residents' health and safety first. We implore you to do your part to ensure that Erie is a safe place to live for years to come. No loopholes, no waivers, no excuses. Thank you.
Thank you for that. That's great. All right. Next is Kelsey Barnholt, followed by Chris Elliott. So Kelsey, let me give you permission to speak. You can unmute and go ahead whenever you're ready.
Thank you for the opportunity to make a public comment tonight regarding the 3 options that were laid out. In my honest opinion, 1,000 feet is not an adequate distance if the goal is to protect occupants from negative impacts to public health, safety, and welfare from existing oil and gas well sites, as you state in the outline. As you are likely aware, it is not unheard of for oil and gas operators to bring shut-in or plug-in abandoned wells back into production or to work over sites. In fact, just recently, a basketball court in Thornton had to be demolished to replug an oil and gas well. This well is in very close proximity to nearby homes, given the small reverse setback requirements. Plugging of wells isn't permanent either. They need to be redone over time to avoid leaks. Can you imagine the nuisance if in 30 years from now, operators need to perform a workover on a well just 25 feet from your home? There have been numerous leaks of fracking wastewater and oil just north of my home that require extensive cleanup. Even the maximum proposed distance of 350 feet isn't far enough away from such industrial processes near homes. Regarding negative impacts, the University of Colorado Cancer Center published a June 9th article highlighting a pilot study conducted by Dr. Lisa McKenzie regarding the effects of oil and gas exposure on childhood leukemia risks. What she found is children diagnosed with acute lymphocytic leukemia, a type of blood cancer, were 4 times more likely to live near oil and gas sites than the control group. The children in this study were between the ages of 2 and 9. I worry every day if the exposure my family has already experienced from the May Jay, Yellowhammer, and Papa Joe wells is going to cause us all to develop cancer in just a few years. Further, the requirement of providing.
Could we wrap up comments in just a minute? You did reach your 3 minutes. Thank you.
In conclusion, if SB 181 sets the limit for setbacks at 2,000 feet for safety reasons, the reverse setback should match that. Anything less is unconscionable and we shouldn't allow loopholes.
Thank you. Next, we have Chris Elliott. I will allow you to talk. Please unmute and go ahead whenever you're ready.
Thank you for the opportunity. This is Chris Elliott. We are the developers at Parkdale and the Spring Hill community. Excited to be in Erie, and Trustee von Woudenberg had suggested at one point that acquiring the plug-in banding rights was important, but that we really ought to look at doing it throughout the entirety of the projects. And we took that to heart and went out and in fact did negotiate with the oil and gas operators and reached an agreement to actually plug and abandon all of the wells on the property. The unfortunate thing is that there are wells on adjacent properties, and with the maximum proposed setbacks, it would actually result in a significant amount of those projects that would be rendered unbuildable. The plug and abandon setback of 50 feet is one that we had agreed early on to voluntarily do. I think the biggest issue with the plug and abandoned well sites is to make sure that there's access to those wells in the event that there was any reason to come back and open it up. It's easy to place these in open space parcels and other locations where access is easy to achieve. With regard to the notice component, we have utilized notice in all of our communities for the variety of issues that come up. And in this particular case, not only would we record something as prescribed by final plat, we would also agree to provide a statement that the location of oil and gas facilities and plugged and abandoned wells be provided to home buyers at the time they sign a contract, and then again some 10 days beforehand. And then also make sure that there is evidence in the way of signage and other means to show that the location of wells. We think that the notion of looking at setbacks and its relationship to development is important, and we want to work hand in hand with city staff as we develop the regulation.
Thank you. All right, next on our list, we have Kim McConnell, followed by Andrew Forkes-Gudmun. I think it cut off a little bit on there. So Kim, I'm going to give you permission to speak if I could find you in the list. I do not see Kim McConnell on here. If anybody is logged in under a different name and you are Kim McConnell, please raise your hand. All right, I will make a note and maybe come back later. So we're going to skip then to Andrew. I'm going to give you permission to speak. Please go ahead and unmute and we will get you going.
Good evening. Thank you very much for this opportunity to speak tonight. My name is Andrew Forkes-Gudmun. I'm the Deputy Director of Logic, the League of Oil and Gas Impacted Coloradans. Logic has been working on oil and gas issues for I think since 2016. We had primarily focused on what I guess would be called regular setbacks until we got the COGCC to adopt a setback regime there. Now we're focusing on local governments finishing the job by adopting a protective reverse setback structure. Oil and gas does not belong in neighborhoods. Neighborhoods do not belong near oil and gas or near heavy industrial activity like oil and gas. That's true regardless of which is there first. SB 181 gave local governments the authority to regulate land use with respect to oil and gas development. That includes reverse setbacks. We believe the goals of a protective reverse setback regime should be to adopt reverse setback regulations that protect residents' health, safety, and welfare, the environment, and wildlife resources, that are regulations that are science-based and account for the real impacts associated with oil and gas development at every stage of the oil and gas facility's life cycle, that allow local governments to plan for the expansion and future housing development to meet growth and affordable housing goals, and to account for the potential future oil and gas development and future housing development in an area. So to meet those goals, I believe there are essentially 6 phases of oil and gas development that a reverse setback structure should address. Those are permitted but unconstructed, pre-production, early production, long-term production, shut-in or temporarily abandoned, and plugged and abandoned. Each one of those phases comes with its own unique set of potential impacts and its own unique scope of potential impacts. We believe that the reverse setback structure should take that into account. And I'd like to focus on plugged and abandoned wells. I believe we've heard several public commenters today speak about their efforts to purchase and plug and abandon existing oil and gas operations within their development. I think that's a laudable goal, but it's not possible for every developer. And the reverse setback structure that you develop should be able to take into account that reality and should propose a reverse setback that's protective and allows a developer to demonstrate that they have made the land that they propose to build houses on safe to do so. The COGCC, through many of its staff members, and I apologize for the dog barking in the background, have indicated that at the very least 150 feet around a plugged and abandoned well is necessary to both provide access and to assure that no catastrophic consequences occur. Because there's 2 types of failure modes for plugged and abandoned wells: catastrophic failure and the slow leaking that we're seeing in neighborhoods in Broomfield around the Davis 436 well, where housing development permits are being held up by a well that's currently leaking methane through what is believed to be a failed wellbore. And I have lots and lots more to say about this, but I think I'm out of time. So thank you very much. And I look forward to continuing this conversation.
Thank you, Andrew. I do not see Kim on the call at this point, and I was made aware that we did not reset the timer for Ms. Barnholt when she was speaking. So I'm going to let her finish up. She had about another 1.5 minutes that she should have been allowed. So I am going to allow her to finish that now while we still give Kim and then Janice a chance to get on the call. So Kelsey, if you want to unmute, you can finish up your last 1.5 minutes.
Thanks so much, Gabby. A couple more points I want to hit on are that the requirement for providing notice to future residents living within 2,000 feet of oil and gas sites needs to happen upfront, probably during the attorney review and inspection timeframe before it's too late for a buyer to get their earnest money back. 10 days before closing is much too late. And what about permitted sites? Would notice also be provided for these? When I bought my home, there was nothing that I could see that would indicate wells were just going to pop up 2,500 feet from my house. And now there's 28 wells just north of me. And too often developers have used land adjacencies to their advantage and to our demise. Erie must protect its residents and take a harsh stance on these reverse setbacks. Thank you.
Thank you, and so sorry that we didn't reset for you earlier. Looking at the list, I still don't see Kim McConnell yet, and next would be Janice Kravitz-Schlickman, and she doesn't seem to be on the line either. So I am going to go ahead and go to Morgan Cullen. You are now able to speak if you want to unmute and get started.
Good evening, Gabby and whoever else is listening. My name is Morgan Cullen, and I'm here tonight on behalf of the Home Builders Association of Metro Denver to raise our concerns regarding the town of Erie's consideration of new reverse setback requirements for residential development from existing oil and gas facilities within town limits. All of my comments this evening are consistent with the letter that the HBA submitted to the Board of Trustees on May 28th. The HBA of Metro Denver represents 400 home builders, developers, remodelers, architects, mortgage lenders, title companies, subcontractors in the 8 county metro area that we serve. In the town of Erie, the HBA of Metro Denver represents many builders and developers currently active within the municipality, with 189 registered permit applications submitted during the first 3 months of the year. Based on the information that we've received from Erie's Planning and Development Director, Fred Starr, we understand that the town is considering increasing reverse setback requirements for residential development. And the collective feedback that we've received from our active builders and developers in the area is that the imposition of an expanded reverse setback requirement would severely restrict the ability of the home building industry to continue to offer housing necessary to meet the needs of future residents hoping to call Erie home. Increasing the city setback ordinance will also make new housing units even more expensive, further exacerbating Erie's affordability challenges and pricing out more middle-income residents out of the market. The National Association of Home Builders' latest priced out estimates from January 21 indicate that a $1,000 increase in the cost of a median priced new home will further price out 2,300 Colorado households out of the market. We have many active builders in Erie with a number of projects in various stages of development. Assuming that Erie's potential policy changes would impact all future development that do not have final plots submitted, the potential impacts to our builders in the town would be devastating. Each of our builders have invested substantial resources and time and capital to meet the needs of the long-term housing needs of Erie residents, and increasing a setback requirement to 500 feet from existing wells and 150 feet from plugged and abandoned wells would produce a significant loss of future homes and $1 million in future tax revenues for the town. In some cases, a setback of this side would threaten the viability of entire residential developments in Erie that have been planned years in advance. The HBA of Metro Denver would, however, support additional disclosure requirements for new existing homes in Erie that fall within the proposed setback guidelines. These disclosures would also be part of the sales contracts between builders and home buyers and could be contained within the county records that they would show up on title commitments. Home buyers would also be made aware of any oil and gas activity in the area by way of written disclosures that would be presented to the home buyer at closing.
Morgan, if I can wrap up, that would be great.
Yep. In conclusion, we strongly encourage the Erie Town Board of Trustees to consider the implications of the proposed changes to the city's reverse setback requirements and their impact on the future of attainable housing, and look forward to continuing this conversation. Thank you, Gabby.
Thank you very much. All right, I'm still looking for Kim McConnell, not seeing her on the line, or Janice Kravitz-Schlickman. If any of you happen to be those people just under a different name, please feel free to raise your hand. But next I do have Tiffany Taskey, and I see you here. I have allowed you to speak. If you want to unmute, you can get started when you're ready.
Hi, my name is Tiffany Taskey. I live at 1909 Alpine Drive in Vista Ridge. I wasn't planning on speaking tonight, but I feel passionate about oil and gas in Erie. And I feel like I'm living Groundhog Day every day over again. The first time I was really involved in the oil and gas movement here in Erie was in 2015, which was 6 years ago, when the Pratt site was drilled behind my house. And I feel like for all these home builders and for Morgan, who just spoke, there is no medium level housing in Erie anymore. You're looking at $500,000 house anywhere you go in Erie for the most part. The setbacks from any housing needs to be the maximum possible. Like 2,000 feet would be my preference because I lived through the horror of the Pratt site. And I see all these people moving into the town of Erie, not knowing that their house is going to be built close to oil and gas, and then wishing that they never moved here. Is that really what we want Erie to be? When is the town of Erie, going to take responsibility for the setbacks and the safety and the health of our community? We are not negotiating with oil and gas anymore or with the home builders. What are we doing for the people in the town of Erie so that we are protecting the safety, the health, the home investments that we've all put into our property? When is the town going to take that initiative and take a bold stance against oil and gas? Because oil and gas does not play nice. They like to put up a good front and that they're working with everybody, but they're really not. The Pratt site, when they were drilling, was considered industrial zoning. Well, now that they want to build the Red Tail Ranch development, it's now considered residential. How does that work? I don't understand why it's always working in the favor of oil and gas and in the favor of the housing developments. What about the people that are directly impacted by oil and gas? I feel sorry for anybody who was not told about oil and gas moving into them and have had to live the horror that many residents in Erie have had to live. And until you live it, you don't know it. And I've really tried to stay active in oil and gas, but it's so disheartening because nothing ever changes. So please, Erie, town of Erie, take this time when you have the opportunity to make some bold stances and choices to protect your community. Thank you for allowing me to speak tonight.
Thank you for your comments. That is the end then of our pre-registered list. We did want to give anyone else on the line who has not yet spoken the opportunity to do so. You would have 3 minutes just like everybody else. If you've decided you would like to speak out loud and you haven't already done so, please feel free to raise your hand. That option should be at the bottom kind of middle of your screen. And I'll give it just a second to see if anybody does that. Are you on camera for that? Are all these people in agreement? All right, I'm not seeing anyone. Like we did mention, we are going to collect all of the Q&As that were sent in to us through the function at the bottom, plus a couple questions that were posted in the chat as well. If you did want to continue talking about this issue, we do have oilandgas@erieco.gov as another email address you can type comments into. And I think I'm going to pass it back then to Malcolm for any follow-up and any kind of wrap-up you might have.
Thank you, Gabby, and thank all of you who participated tonight, share their perspectives. Please, we will be publishing the comments and questions that were aired tonight. If you have others, as Gabby said, please go to our oil and gas page and give us your comments there as well. Encourage others to do the same. Our intent tonight was to gather information to help the Board of Trustees make an informed decision on this matter. We have not yet scheduled a follow-up session on this for the board, but we will be doing that, and we'll publicly notice that, make sure that everyone who participated in tonight's meeting gets notice of that. I guess with that, I'd say thank you all again for sharing a bit of your evening with us tonight, and stay tuned as the board considers this matter further. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks to everybody.